going to go ahead and post our attendance if we need it.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Hello, if you're just joining us and you still need to do the attendance, I've posted it in the chat so you can click on that, but you only have to do it once. So if you did it earlier, you're good.
And this is such a small group. We'd love for y'all to turn on your cameras and your audio. This is going to be a lot smaller than many of the other groups. So we want this to be a really open forum. You guys feel comfortable participating, interjecting.
And if you want to, go ahead while we're waiting to see if there's any more joining. If you want to, put your name and where you're from in the comments.
Tina, I just put the slides in there for you if you want to share your screen.
All right. Okay, I didn't know I was sharing my screen.
Or I can.
Yeah, I can share.
Okay.
Just let me know when you want me to, move things over.
I will defer to Krista and Ashley for that. So all yours.
There's one poll at the beginning that we're going to need to go to, but you should be able to click on it, I think, from your screen.
Let's see. I've got what have I got? 2 o'clock. So, well, 1 o'clock. I'm sorry. My watch is still on Tennessee time, East Coast. But welcome everybody to Effective and Ethical Supportive Candidates. We've got Melissa Shields and Ashli Polizos and Krista Marcum. And I'm Tina Benson from Huntsville City Schools. I will be monitoring the chat and helping the presenter answer any questions that you may have. And we want to keep this engaging and informative. And we have a small group, so if you can, keep your cameras on and we can chat back and forth, or you can always use the chat box if you feel more comfortable that way. Just be sure to ask questions and let us help you. And we are also recording this session so that you may view it later. And I've posted the attendance link. So if you have not clicked on it yet today and registered for PowerSchool and your attendance, go ahead and do that so that you can get credit for it. And then I'll turn everything over to Melissa.
I think I'm going to actually grab that baton and I'm going to pass it to Ashley and Krista. This is something we've talked about for a number of years because a lot of folks say, I want to help, but how much can I say? I know I got some oldies in the room that remember when we first went through national board and they're like, you can't let anyone see what you've done. It was just a very, much more, I think that's when Atlas came out. We thought, oh my gosh, that's blasphemy. You can see the videos, you can see the components. Like, can you do that? So we wanted to provide just a space to say, okay, what does that look like? I mean, I see Marcia Farabee in the virtual room. You know, she and I supported teachers in Etowah County for a number of years, and we were just kind of navigating, okay, what can we, because we really didn't have a lot of, I guess, support in that respect to determine what's the best way to provide support to our candidates, and just kind of trying to be as nimble as we could, but also provide an opportunity for our candidates to learn and grow. So we hope this is just a fun opportunity for us to fellowship, and I am just going to ask Krista and Ashli to take it over.
Okay, well, I'll introduce myself and then let Krista introduce herself, and then we'll get this ball rolling. I'm Ashli Polizos, and I'm an administrator. I'm an assistant principal at Oak Mountain High School in Birmingham, Alabama. I certified in EA Social Studies in 2011, and I renewed in 2021. Thank you, Jesus. It was a tough year to renew, but I was very thankful. And I'm just really happy to be here to present with Krista and to share some stuff with you guys. I know many of you are already supporting candidates. So whether you are a veteran supporter or this is something that you're stepping into, we hope that we can provide some really good tips and ideas. And like we said before, this is a small group. We really want it to be kind of a dialogue conversation. This is not a situation where we're going to just talk for 2 hours. So please feel free to join in and share experiences and ideas and reflections. All right, Krista.
Good afternoon. My name is Krista Marcum, and I work down with Gulf Shore City Schools. I teach juniors and seniors science. We teach marine biology and environmental courses. So our students like to get out in the environment learning science. I also run our district cohort. We have about 40 teachers going through the national board process at this time. So about 1/3 of our school district going through national. That's pretty exciting. And then I am the president of the ALMBCT network. Have some big shoes to fill following Ashli. We're really excited, once again, just like Ashli said, about today, and we want you to definitely be involved, ask questions, just participate.
Okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is just kind of open it up with a poll. So you can use your computer or your cell phone to join. This is a poll everywhere poll. And so you can either go to that website that is linked there, or you can text 37607. The message is going to be Ashli Polizos 828, and it'll give you a message that says you've joined the session. So our question to kind of get us started, or our prompt rather, is what are some questions that you want to have answered during this drill? So what are some things we're talking about supporting candidates effectively and ethically? So what are some questions that you have that you want us to make sure that we discuss? And I'll give everybody a few minutes to add some questions. And I don't know if it's possible, Tina, for you to pull that up so we can see what everybody comes up with.
All right, let's see. Let's see if it'll work. Let's see. Might not pull it up until I have answered something. Let's see. Well, it is not letting me see the results, I guess, because I didn't create it.
Okay.
That might be something for the creator.
All right, give me a second. I created it. So if you guys will give me a second, I'll pull it up and then I'll share mine, then I'll hand it back to you. Is that okay?
Okay, that sounds good. I'll stop share. That way you can
hold on just a second.
Yeah, then you can pull up share to do.
Okay. Bear with me for just a second. I am seeing some questions come in. I've got it pulled up on my other computer, so I'm seeing some good questions coming in. So just keep them coming. Give me just a second. All right, can you guys see the poll?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so y'all can see these questions populating. Okay, so how much guidance is too much? Where's the line? I think that's a great question. How do you handle a situation when a CSP does something questionable in a mentoring session cohort meeting that you facilitate? Great question. And for those of you that don't know, CSP is a title that we used to use that we no longer, well, a lot of people still use it, but the one that the NBPTS people use now is PLF. So those words are interchangeable. How do you best prompt your candidates to share their reflective ideas? I love that. We're going to definitely address that. How can I provide feedback without breaking NBCT rules? Is it okay to share a video I use for my comps? What are some ethical issues I might see? And what is a PLF? Let's see if we added any more. What are good leading questions to get a candidate to start thinking like an NBCT? So a lot of the things that we're going to talk about are how you make it a reflective kind of situation for the teacher that you're working with, because that's really what you want, is you want the ideas and the reflections to come from that person as you're supporting them through this process. So we are going to talk a lot about just kind of pulling out this reflective thinking, like we mentioned. Okay, and Tina, if you will want to switch back over and go back to our presentation, that would be great.
All right.
So she's swapping back over. The first thing, like I said a minute ago, that we're going to talk about is that title, that PLF title. You're a facilitator. So the new title by the NBPTS is Professional Learning Facilitator, PLF, same thing as CSP. But you know, you need to think of yourself as a facilitator of this journey for that person. It's not you doing it for them or with them, but it's rather you facilitating that reflective journey with them. So one of the things that we want to reflect on is, what are some unique characteristics of adult learners? You know, we're used to working with kids. We're used to working with students who at the oldest are probably, you know, high school, teenagers, all the way down to pre-K. But when you work with adult learners, it's really a different kind of situation. So think for a minute about what would be different about working with an adult versus a student. So just think about that for a second. And if you want to put in the chat, drop some comments. What is different about, or what is a unique characteristic of an adult learner? Okay, fixed mindsets for sure. Anxiety. So anxiety is one of those things that kind of goes across the age But you definitely, just like you have anxiety in your students, you're going to have anxiety in adult learners. Outside responsibilities, that is a great point. I think we have to be really respectful of the fact that many times the people that we're working with, they have family commitments, they have job commitments, church, social commitments. There's a lot more going on when you're an adult that you have to balance. So we really have to be respectful of those personal and sometimes professional obligations. Yeah, they have a lot to juggle: family, jobs, yep, peer pressure. And let me just kind of say something about that and the anxiety. You know, it is a big deal when people know that you're going through this process. It makes you put even more pressure on yourself, because a lot of times there are people that know that you're going through the process, and there's a possibility that you might not certify the first time. So there is a lot of pressure and anxiety, and we have to be aware of that. Okay, and then some of you guys are talking about kind of the expectations that you would have for adult learners. You expect them to be more prepared, independent, which should be the case, but maybe is not always the case. Okay. So now I want you to think about what kinds of things, if we're talking about all these different unique characteristics of adult learners, that they do have outside obligations, what kind of things can you do as a PLF to honor those unique characteristics? And I'll give you one example. You need to give feedback. You need to make sure that you're giving feedback, because they do have anxiety about the process. You want to make sure that you are giving them actionable feedback, because that's going to reduce some of the anxiety. What are some other things that you can do to kind of honor and you know, be conscientious of those unique adult learner characteristics? Calming, supportive, yep. Honor their time. I think that is such a great answer. And sometimes just articulating that I know you've got a lot on your plate. Let's make sure that we schedule this, and keeping your other commitments in mind. Let's find some good time for us to sit down, and I'm going to give you my complete undivided attention when I have your time, because I'm going to honor your time. Flexibility, yeah, for sure. Give them options. Very good answers. And you know, another thing that sometimes happens with maybe adult and children, but definitely adults in this kind of situation, is there is a lot of pressure when you're going through this process, and you might get in a situation where the person just says, you know, I've got a lot on my plate, I've got a lot going on, just tell me what I need to do. Just tell me what I need to do to certify. And that is, you really want to avoid that. You really want to encourage them to enjoy the process, to embrace the process as their own. But that is something that happens, and you need to be aware of, you know, your answer and how you're going to handle that if it does come up. Of course, you need to encourage them. And another thing that you can do is to, you know, remind them to be communicative with their family and friends. Remind them to have those conversations with their support network, to say, hey, I'm going through this process. This is what it entails. And I would really appreciate if you could do this for me, or if you could support me in this way. So encourage them to have those conversations and make sure that they're getting the support that they need with their family and friends. You know, if you're working with somebody that has kids, for example, you might just want to have a conversation about, you know, what are some ways that you can get support from your family? Because you've got a full plate, you got kids, and I know you want to be able to do this. And so let's brainstorm, let's talk about some things that you can do, make sure that you're supported as you go through this process. All right, very good. Are there any other questions or reflections about how we support adult learners? Okay, go to the next slide. Sometimes I like what Kim said, the reassurance that you've been there too. You know, the good thing about our situation is we have been through this process before, as we're supporting people. And, you know, just kind of that reassurance of, we've all been in the same boat. I promise you're going to get through it. Sometimes just being a good listening ear is a good thing to do. Okay, there should be a slide in between, slide 4, right before this one. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so your primary role is to help that candidate elevate how they think about their teaching practice and to communicate that through the lens of those standards of accomplished teaching. But remember, it is about their journey and their process. So, one of the things that we can think about are the types of support that we can give. And some of this is kind of like related to your personality and your personal strengths. So when we think about types of support, there's intellectual support, and that's you maybe talking to somebody about the content standards, unpacking those standards, and just giving them some ideas, some strategies and ideas in that realm. Logistical, just giving them tips on how can you organize all of this paperwork. And, one of the things when I did it the first time, it was pieces of paper in a box. The second time I did it, it was digital. And so I used Google Drive and I organized it into folders. So just having that conversation about the logistics and the organizational management of it. Another type of support you can give is emotional. And I go back to those really good social emotional skills, things like active listening, figuring out how to provide that emotional support, because it is emotional. There's a lot invested for a person in this process. So you need to be able to give that emotional support when it's needed. Technological support, one of the things that is constantly changing is technology, and there's a lot of different ways that we use technology in the process. So maybe, giving them ideas like using a swivel camera and how they can set things up. So being that technological resource. I love that, Kim. I love that Krista was your emotion. It sounds like Krista was your emotional support. And that is exactly, sometimes we do just need somebody to talk us off the ledge, to just say, you've got this, you can do this. Because at every point, for everybody's journey, I promise there's a point where you say, I don't want to do this anymore. I know when I was doing it, I got about maybe 3/4 of the way through and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, but I can't not do it. I'm in the middle of it. So you just need that listening ear and knowing that that person has had that same experience. You're not alone and that you're there for them. So those are 4 different types of support. And like I said, you may be more comfortable with one than the other. And your person may need different types of support at different points in time, but just be aware that there are different types of support: intellectual, logistical, emotional, and technical. And those are the things that you need to be able to make sure you provide. Okay. And I will hand it over to Krista. I think we're about to do some fun, engaging activities now.
Absolutely. The first thing we're going to do, I'm not sure that this one fun or engaging, but it is very informative and important. If you were able to print off your ethics policy, if you can get that out. If not, I've just posted the link in the chat and you can open it there. And I actually called a language arts friends of mine. That way, if anybody didn't have theirs printed, to see what you could do. They said if you use Cami or, I wrote another one down. I can't remember it now, but I know for sure Cami, you could upload a PDF and you can actually annotate on the PDF. So if that's something you would like to do digitally, or even just take some notes as you read, would be fine. But we want to spend a few minutes allowing you to just look through this 4-page document. This document, the importance of it is not only to protect the candidate, but it's also to protect the PLF. So that's you. We want to make sure that you understand there are ethical ways to support candidates and there are unethical ways to support candidates. So we always want to make sure that we're representing ourselves and national, how they've requested us to do that. So if you will just open that up. Do we want to do small groups for this? Or do we want to just give them a little bit of independent time to review? Oh, you're muted.
Speaking of technological help, we've got about 20 people, so maybe we can do the breakout rooms, and I guess we'd need about 4 people in each room. Is that?
5 people in each room, and they could each do a page, and we could come back and talk about that page if you want to kind of jigsaw it.
Krista, can you hear me?
I can.
What was that page you said to pull again? Cami, how do you spell that?
Oh, K-A-M-I.
K-A-M-I. AMI. Okay.
And then you can actually upload the PDF in there and you can click on it and hide on it. You don't
Awesome,
have to
thank
do
you.
that, but yeah, I'll play around with. I thought that might be a strategy some people might want to implement in their classroom with school starting back soon.
Is it .com?
I usually just Google Cami and then click on it, to be honest, but I'm checking. Cami, camiapp.com. So KAMI. Okay. Yep.
Thank you. Thanks.
That's fine if we want to just, you guys read it and annotate it and then come back in a minute or two and talk. Is that good?
Okay. That's fine. We'll just give them a few minutes and we'll just put everybody on mute. I'll start the time now.
Krista and Ashley and Tina, I do have the breakout rooms ready to roll whenever you say go.
Right, can I get everyone to comment in the chat real quick? Give me a thumbs up to go on, or if you need a minute or two, with the number on how much longer you want looking over too quickly. Okay, we'll give just a couple more minutes. All right, as you read through this, I want you to go back and kind of look over what you've read and tell me is important in you as a PLF. So just throw some things in that. What do you see that's really important as a PLF that will help guide you from this document?
Krista, I think that you know the standards and you understand the process and the assessment process.
Absolutely. Knowing the resources available, how to locate them, staying up to date with all things National Board. Absolutely. Do I have anything else? Oh, I like that, Kim. Clear and distinct separation between opinion and National Board. Oh, that's really important, Audrey. Using your National Board guidelines or information for answers. Absolutely. All right, any phrases that you think represent critical parts of this policy in those 4 pages? I think I had that number on speed dial for a while there, Diana. So any phrases that you read that might highlight some of these things we we're looking for them. I'm sure there's going to be one any second. There we go. Let's see, Willie. They'll endorse collaboration within learning communities as part of the professional development experience. Absolutely. And emphasize the importance of individual responsibility and accountability in the development of candidate work. Oh, Sandy, they cannot make choices for it's good. Solely responsible for the creation of the certification materials. Good. So that's not on the mentor. That needs to be on them. They get to decide, you know, what showcases they're teaching the most, and those are the kinds of things they submit. Sensitive to the emotional needs of candidates while asking questions that encourage them to present their evidence more clearly. Absolutely. Can you give an example of this? How would this look in your classroom? Those kinds of things. It does actually, it removes the burden from the PLF. You don't ever want, the biggest thing for me is when I go and I sit down and I work with someone and say, you know, just because that I say that I think that you did a great job does not mean that you're going to certify. And they have to understand that, you know, we are there to help and guide them and to steer them towards those national board, you know, standards and get them to master those, but we can't, you know, do the work for them. Well, and Sandy, I think that's important. A lot of people do get frustrated, but we as mentors need to be clear about that up front and that they understand those are the rules. But you're right, I don't know if everyone does that. Very good point. All right, we have 5 ethics scenarios. So you are going to be assigned to a room. And Melissa, did you say that you named these rooms already?
I left them just as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, since those were the numbers of the scenarios. I thought that kind of kept it easy. So
Absolutely.
yep, we're ready to roll when you are.
All right, so your room number will match your assignment, but here's what I just realized. This is technology that I have. Can we send them that slide? Like if we go to the next slide, Tina? Someone help me with this here. This is for number 1. So do we just want to have?
I tell you what I can do is I think you guys already done that, but I'll put the link in the chat.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna say
everybody
there's a
will have
link
it.
that is just to the slides.
Okay, perfect. And then that can open that up. So you'll go to that slide and you'll find your number. So if you're put in room 1, you'll do scenario 1, so on and so forth up through room 5. All right, you want to go ahead and split us into rooms?
Yep. So remember to look for your room. I always forget that myself, and then I have to be like, what room are we in? So I'll be looking. I'm moving you now.
See, Krista, you're an excellent teacher. We finished our homework first.
Glad to help. That's just because you guys were the best students.
Oh, did you hear that, Willie?
Y'all didn't need me.
Do you guys need me to close them or keep them open? What you want me to do?
I don't know. As a co-host, can I jump in other breakout rooms?
You know, I go back and forth on that. I'm not sure. Maybe.
I mean, I can try and pop in and see. Broadcast message to all. 1 more minute. How about that? And then we'll bring 1 minute. All right. I think it's good to hit close all rooms. Okay, and they'll be fully closed in 60 seconds. So that works out perfect.
Morning.
All right, I think it looks like we have everybody back. Hope you had some good conversations happening. And I am going to go ahead and read the prompt on each one, even though you know about your prompt. And then I'm going to have each group share kind of what they decided. All right, so number 1, a widely respected education professor with 30 years of experience in reading and responding to work of grad students became interested in national board certification. He offers to read the work of candidates in his state, a state with no formal candidate support system. He reads their components and grades them. Several of the candidates have been given A's, but then they do not certify. They are convinced the assessment process does not identify accomplished teaching. Is it unethical, ethical, or why? And why? What do you guys get?
Our group said unethical because as the mentor, we're not to be giving a grade or saying, you know, that giving them a false sense that they may definitely, or they're going to definitely qualify or certify or whatever.
Absolutely. If that grade indicated that they would certify, then I would definitely agree with it as being unethical. Anything else you guys got?
Well, again, just like Cindy said, we don't grade what we're reading from the candidates. We can offer suggestions to try to get them to think about their practice and reflect on what they're doing, but we in no way say this is A work or B work. We don't grade it, but that's not what we do.
Absolutely. Or 2s or 3s or any of that. We would never assign that as we grade. Now, officially from National Board, this scenario is ethical. So let's talk about why they consider it. I think we did read into it a little bit as an A meant you were going to certify, and it didn't necessarily tell us that. So they said that the assessors are going to look for evidence of the National Board Certificate Standards, and they're going to use the rubrics as the scoring criteria. And then the professors assign grades, and they may have used different criteria. So it doesn't say that the professor looked at the actual rubric or the National Board Standards to assess them. And the professor should have their grades are not reflective of National Board criteria. And candidates should be cautious about someone that's providing support and where that support is being provided. So you want to make sure that someone that's supporting you would, have been someone that's been through the process and been trained to support candidates. Excellent job. All right, scenario 2. Let's go on to the next. All right, now we have an experienced candidate support provider that's getting paid by the state that tells all of her candidates they must italicize the questions in the component directions and include them in their entries. She tells them she did this when she certified with points to spare. She also tells them she doesn't know a single National Board certified teacher who didn't include the questions in the component entries, and the assessors are trained to follow the questions in their scoring. Ethical, unethical, why? What'd you get?
We said that it was unethical. There were a couple of points that we discussed. One is that this comment that assessors are trained to follow the questions in their scoring, which may be correct. I mean, we all know that that is correct, but that does not mean that they have to include the questions in their commentary. Assessors, our understanding is that assessors are trained to locate the answers to the questions. That doesn't mean that the candidate has to put their question in there, and that to indicate that somehow that's tied to their score, whether they do that or not, is really misleading.
Absolutely. Any thoughts from that group?
We also talked about that the saying with points to spare kind of indicates you'll pass.
Right. Absolutely. And you never want to indicate that someone's going to pass, because that's not something that you're actually helping decide.
I think also just that comment in itself just really rubbed me the wrong way that, I don't think you should ever talk about, how well you did. I passed with points to spare. That one just really rubbed me the wrong way. And I think going back to that emotional support that we provide our candidates, it's not about us. It's not about you. It's not your journey. It's their journey. And, if you're looking to alleviate somebody's anxiety, you don't tell them how well you did.
Sure.
So just that whole comment just kind of bothered me.
Yeah, that's
And to me, it bothered me that she said she doesn't know a single NBCT who didn't include the question. I said, I teach in a middle school, and that's like peer pressure at its worst. Well, everybody's doing it, especially when there's no basis in the guidelines that is required to do that.
Absolutely. According to National Board, the official answer is ethical/misguided. The CSP is providing candidates with a strategy that is inaccurate. It's called the halo effect. Do it the way I did it and you'll certify. So that's kind of something we've got to always keep in mind and think about kind of our own bias with that. The unintended consequences of this takes a lot of writing space. So it decreases the amount of space that candidates now have to demonstrate evidence of their standards and their accomplished teaching. And then the is making decisions for the candidate rather than affording them opportunities to make their own decisions. The strategy could be helpful during drafting, but eventually the question should be removed. All right, scenario 3. Dolores, a candidate in a large urban district, notices the candidate support provider, an NBCT hired and paid for by the school district, has subtly selected 4 candidates out of 30 for special assistance. At their bi-weekly meetings, the coordinator takes these candidates into a separate room. One of these 4 candidates admits to Dolores that the coordinator rewrites whole pages of their portfolio components. The district does not yet have an NBCT, even though nearly 60 candidates have attempted the process. The coordinator believes the assessment process benefits all teachers, whether they certify or not, and is desperate to keep the program going. What did we get here?
Well, we all said that this was unethical on many levels, and you are rewriting somebody else's work instead of them doing it themselves. You have specially chosen 4 out of 30. You are taking money for this position, which you are justifying your own position by trying to get somebody to certify or do some special attention for somebody else.
Absolutely. Anything else?
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. They're rewriting material that's unethical. This process needs to be owned by the candidate. And you can't treat certain group members different ways. You know, if someone comes to you for some extra help and wants an additional meeting, that would be something different than let me pull you out of this meeting and only work with you every week. So I agree. Excellent job. Number 4. An NBCT in a state with no formal candidate support program develops a mailing advertisement offering her services as a support provider. She's never been a part of candidate support group and does not have any formal training in candidate support. In fact, the NBCT did not receive and support any support services during her pursuit of certification. The mailing is sent to 300 districts through the Teachers Association, and the teacher begins an online support program for 12 candidates. The candidates pay $100 each for her help. Ethical or unethical?
Allison and I were in this group together, so I'm going to let Allison share what we came up with.
Thanks, Ashley.
Totally putting you on the spot there.
Yes, you are. Well, in the end, we decided that this, although we might not agree with how this candidate support provider ended up coming about her ways and how she went about advertising and not having the experience and the training to actually provide the support with NBCT. However, it is ethical as far as she didn't do anything unethical. But I mean, my first thought was, well, how about all those in-service candidate support people? You know, like, what about us who are going through the trainings? So I kind of felt like, well, why isn't she providing her services with the in-service center? But that was my opinion. But in the end, we figured it was ethical, although we might not have agreed with the whole process.
Absolutely.
And Allison brought up a good point, and this is, I think, just something to keep in mind, is that, you know, these resources that we have, like the regional in-service centers, a lot of people don't know about it because a lot of times the way that's communicated is it's like filtered through the district, and, you know, administrators and district supervisors get a lot of information that they're supposed to relay to teachers, and sometimes it doesn't always get relayed to teachers. So if you are an NBCT in a school, please, by all means, take this responsibility on to share the resources that we have, because we are very lucky in Alabama. We have a lot of resources in our state. This is a totally different presentation that's going to be in the next drill, but we talk about advocacy, and you guys as current NBCTs, you are the wealth of knowledge, and you are perfectly, you should be the ones that are speaking up and telling people about the resources that we have. That is definitely under your responsibilities or your capabilities to do that. So I would suggest, you know, asking your principal if you can have 5 minutes of faculty meeting time to just say, hey, let me share these resources with you. This process may seem daunting, but here are all the resources that you have. Because sometimes it's just a matter of people not knowing, and then you get on Google or Facebook and you start seeing things like this, and you don't even realize that there is a resource that most districts in our state will provide the funding for. So, you know, be willing and be active about sharing those resources.
You guys were correct. The scenario was ethical. And I really like how National Board states it. You've heard the expression caveat emptor. Does anyone know what that means? It's a realtor expression down here we use a lot. I do real estate part-time. Buyer beware. Okay, if you're going to buy a house, you better get the house inspected and you know what you're getting. It's on you. That's your. So same thing, if someone's going to work with a candidate support provider, it's on them. They need to make sure they check out their credentials. They understand if they've had any experience with this in the past. There may be someone with great intentions, but pretty confident. As soon as I finished my NBCT, I was a little gung-ho and excited, but I wasn't ready to fully support candidates. But I'm thankful once I did start that I had lots of mentors in my NBCT family that I could reach out to assist me and, be there to answer questions. Because once you do get started, it's a whole lot different than, these things are really important to keep in mind. But then, if there's a specific question about a math or a music assignment and trying to understand that, well, when I have that process, that's where it's great to have a network of people to reach out to and be able to assist them. All right, let's go to the fifth one. This was my group. So I'm going to abstain and let them talk here in just a second. We had a professor that has attended, that's not an NBCT, but they came to the PLF training. She's convinced that assessors have the best understanding of what National Boards is looking for and develops a small support program that uses only assessors and mentors. The people she hires, mostly NBCTs, freely share descriptions of videos they've seen and detailed information about how retired prompts were scored. They describe the process of locating evidence to candidates and give specific advice to candidates on constructing what they believe are easy to score components and exercises. What did we come up with?
We agreed that this was unethical. One, the PLF is not an NBCT, so you haven't gone through the process. So how can you lead others through it when you haven't gone through it yourself? And we also agreed that because she's only using assessors, it's almost as if she's communicating to the candidates that if you listen to what these assessors are telling you, you'll certify.
Absolutely. Using retired prompts is fine, but it's questionable to lead candidates to believe the types of components and exercises are going to be easy to score. So that's something else to keep in mind. What do you guys think of this? Helpful? Yes, no, maybe. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, some pitfalls you could run into. Sharing your own certification work. That's just a no in general. Don't ever share what you wrote, your videos, any of those things. Yes, they do it on Atlas, but that's completely different. Those are, I believe it's a 3.75 or higher that you have to post or to have to score to get on Atlas. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ashli, do you know?
I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I know it's among the highest scoring, so I would think at the least, yes.
Right. So that's Atlas is a different ballgame, and Ashli will talk about that in a minute. But don't ever share your personal work or your components, your videos, anything. Don't ever grade, judge, or score candidate work. You could go through the rubric with them and say, hey, I'm not really seeing this here. Could we do something to strengthen this? That you could do, but I wouldn't circle it and give them a score. Emphasize the way things used to be. You don't want to do the halo effect. Back in my day, we did this, go on best practices. What are you learning in your trainings? Those kinds of things. Feel accountable for a candidate's success or failure. And that's hard. If you've helped it and you've done everything and certified, that's tough. But ultimately it is up to the candidate and it's up to them to demonstrate their accomplished teaching. And thankfully they have other opportunities and chances if they're not able to get there the first time. You're not supposed to make choices for the candidates and then overemphasizing the rules. I think that's it. Yep.
Okay, so Krista kind of touched on Atlas as a resource, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this really, really great resource that we have actually more access to in Alabama than many other people do. So let me just give you an overview of what this resource is. So this is a website that we have access to, and I'll explain how to get access in just a few minutes. But basically, it is a website that you can log into, and you can see over 1,400, I think it's, at the moment, it's like 1,410 actual NBCT cases that have been scored. I think it's 3 and above is the measure, but these are the gold standard of cases. These are the cases and the submissions that, you know, are the exemplars. So it has a search function that you can use to search different criteria, and it's going to pull up video and then a transcript of the video, and also the reflection and the materials that that teacher used. It is available to any regional in-service center. Any person who is supporting candidates can gain access to Atlas. And once you have an account, you can actually log in, you can do these searches, and then you can actually save the cases and the videos that you want, and you can make notes. So it's a really great tool.
Actually, if I could just pop in there. So here's something I thought was so interesting. So when Atlas first came about, which has only been, I'm trying to think, when I first got trained 3 years ago, maybe. Initially, we were told this is not for candidates. This is for teachers and teacher leaders to go in and see accomplished teaching practices. You can go in and click a standard and say, I want to see this, you know, ELA standard taught in the video, and it'll be like 3 minutes and 2 seconds to 4 minutes and 5 seconds. This is when that standard was being addressed. And then we really, you know, asked if they could reconsider that, because this is an invaluable tool for teachers to see. One, we're talking about writing earlier, what type of writing National Board is looking for. Also, just to kind of comfort you to see, okay, I can do that. So the Atlas tool in just the last couple of years we've really made it much more accessible to candidates with National Board's blessing. But it's just ironically, I think people think Atlas was really created for candidates in mind, and it was actually completely the opposite. But it is, I would have done anything to have been able to see some of this as I was going through National Board years ago.
Hey, Melissa, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Isn't it the State Department that funds so that all the in-service centers can give access to Atlas? Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
It's part of the education fund. So that I think we get $50,000 so that every teacher in the state is given access to Atlas, but it's by request. And so it's just one of those things that if you ask, you'll get it. I think National Board really prefers you to use Atlas in some sort of like professional learning community. So maybe, you know, the English teachers have created an Atlas group and they're really working through it. You know, I mean, this is a conversation for another time, but I've even used Atlas with principals to calibrate instructional rounds. So we can see what does an accomplished teacher's classroom look like, and we use our instructional rounds tools to watch a case. And then we go into the classrooms and we really know what we're looking for.
Thank you.
Okay, Tina, if you want to go to the next slide. So I'm going to delve in a little bit deeper and talk about what Atlas is and how you can get access. So if you look at this screen, this is kind of what it looks like when you log in and pull it up. And you'll see on the left-hand side, you've got this toolbar that you can drop down, and it will give you different criteria that you can search. So you can search by grade level, you can search by subject and topic even. The framework are going to be the different standards. So even if you are, this is totally different, but even if you are supporting a teacher candidate, I know a lot of our schools are doing EdTPA portfolios. They've even got EdTPA standards as a framework that you can search. So you can use that search function on the left-hand side to search the cases. It has all 25 National Board certification areas. It's got the STEM subjects, it's got ESL, so it's got pretty much every certification area. It has examples of those. Okay, you want to go to the next one? So what it is just like Krista and Melissa were saying, it's really kind of like a glance at what a video might look like. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that these are all cases prior to the redesign. So the instructions and the requirements are a little bit different now for certification than they were when these videos were produced, but it still gives you a snapshot of what it really looks like, because sometimes you have a candidate who says, I can't even imagine, what this is supposed to look and feel like. So this is an actual snapshot of what these videos look like that you can show to someone, not to tell them this is the only way, the end all be all, but this is what one example looks like. And they are exemplars, so they're good examples. And you can look at this one. This is a case that was a kindergarten, and you can see the topics that they were exploring this particular. And then I don't think you can see it on the screen, maybe on the next one, but below it, it has the actual transcript of the video and the context. All right, so this is a different example, but this is what you would see if you scroll down on that same video. So this one is a social studies EA classroom. And if you look on the left-hand side, it's showing you all of the standards that you're going to see in the commentary and in the video. And the really cool thing about this is what you can do is click on the standard, and it will actually highlight in the commentary where that individual addressed the standard. And so that actually gives you some examples of the language and examples of how that person addressed that particular standard. So if you're working with a candidate, you can actually pull up examples in that person's grade level, subject area, content level, and then actually look at standards, examples of standards, because sometimes, when you're supporting someone, it's kind of hard to articulate, even after you've unpacked the standards, what does this really look like? How does it sound when you talk about it? So this is a great example to show them, to just kind of give them a snapshot of what it might look like. So you can go on to the next one if you want to. So like Melissa said, we are really fortunate in Alabama, and I'm going to do a quick little plug here with the Alabama NBCT network. So one of the big missions of the network is to advocate throughout our state. And we are so fortunate that this network has done a lot of groundwork over the past decade to advocate and to really bring awareness to our legislators and our education policymakers, that they understand the importance and the relevance of national board certification. So as a result of those efforts, every year, the past several years, we've gotten funds, and the funds are used in different ways. Some of those funds are used for scholarships for people pursuing the process, but they also fund the regional in-service centers and make it so that they can provide support to candidates and also give access to candidates to access Atlas. But like Melissa said, it is really, the National Board really meant for this to be more of a, something that you look at through the lens of a professional learning community, as opposed to just somebody, an individual just logging on and looking at it. So it's really meant to be something that you do kind of in a group, in a community. That was really their intent. So if this is something, if you are providing support for people, and this is something that you do not have access to, what you can do is you can contact your regional in-service center. If you click on this link, or if you go to this link, I know you can't maybe click on it, but if you go to this link, and the link's in the chat, then you can contact your in-service center, tell them that you're providing support to candidates and need access to Atlas, and they can set you up with that. At the very least, if you go to the Atlas website, you can get access to, there's a form, a Google form on there, and you can get access to 4 cases without, doing anything else. So if you just wanted to kind of play around with it, if you're waiting to gain full access, you can go to the Atlas website for National Board and fill that out and get access to 4 cases. Okay, you want to go to the next slide?
Actually, something that's brand new as of like 4 days ago. So I just put it in the chat. So as you were talking about, well, that's timely. So we just put together a Google Doc. I mean, there's nothing sexy about it. It's just a Google Doc of all 11 in-service centers. and the directors, their email addresses, as well as their current national board support. So this is where they're going to be updating their sessions each year. We just wanted to have one place to house everything. So we're asked all the time, like, who's doing what when. So I think Stephanie Hulon put this together, and we just kind of been adding to it. So you might want to bookmark that, as this is a document that we'll continue editing.
That's awesome. That is such a great document. I will confess, when I was going through the process, I had no idea that I had a regional in-service center. I couldn't even tell you they did or any kind of support. So those in-service centers are really vital in supporting candidates. They provide a lot of resources. They provide mentors, but also access to Atlas and many other things. So make sure that you find your in-service center, get connected with that director and find out the resources that you have at your disposal, because that's a really helpful thing. In addition to that document, I've got some links in the presentation, some other resources. We have a Facebook group for the network. The Alabama NBCT network has a Facebook group. We also have content area Facebook groups, and this is something that we set up last summer. And we have them. I don't think we have one for every single certification area, but pretty much anytime we get somebody who is interested, we just set up a new one. We've got some of the smaller groups are combined, but if you have a mentee that you're working with, make sure that you tell them to join the NBCT network Facebook group and also their content area Facebook group, because that's just a great place to get resources and to dialogue and to talk to people that are pursuing the same certification area. Dr. Shields is a wealth of knowledge. And her page, she has a whole website that has multiple pages of helpful resources, but we've got links to her NBCT resource page and the Atlas resource page. So those are great places to be. And I'll just put a plug in for Dr. Shields' website in general. There's just a multitude of resources on there. And then the network's website is right there as well. We are really fortunate that we have a very, very strong, very active network that is advocating for us and making sure that we are getting these resources, that we're getting the funding for these resources year after year. We also have ambassadors that work with our network, and I believe Tina is an ambassador, and these ambassadors are kind of sprinkled throughout the state, and they are a great resource as well. So, if you are supporting someone, make sure that you're connecting with the ambassadors, that you're connecting with your regional in-service center directors to ensure that you are giving that person all the support that they will need. Okay. All right, I'm going to go back to I'm going to open it up to questions, but I'm going to start with the questions that we got in our poll, just to kind of make sure that we address all that. So how do you balance when some candidates make it and others do not? And this is an open forum, so those of you that are attending the session, please feel free to chime in. And we will also do our best to answer your questions, but how do you balance when some candidates make it and others do not? So who wants to take that on?
Say that one again, Ashley.
How do you balance when some candidates make it and others do not? So I guess, how do you have that conversation, especially if you have a group of people you're supporting and maybe some of them make it and then some of them don't? How do you have that conversation?
I think Marcia was with me. We had that happen once in our district, and all got it but one. And it was just an amazing, she was a librarian, like just an amazing, yeah, that's hard. That's really hard. I'd love to hear what everybody else says.
Well, I think it's very important that you reaffirm the teacher that just because you didn't certify this year doesn't make you a bad teacher. Melissa and I knew one particular teacher, and she certified the second year in mathematics, but she was the same teacher. You know, it was just the way she, you know, her writing and the things. So providing that emotional support, like you mentioned in the beginning, is key to that. And letting the teacher understand that you grew in the process. Even if you don't certify, you're growing as a professional, and that it's just tweaking some things, you know, if that's what it is, and to encourage them to keep going.
I think that's a great point. And I think you're exactly right. This is really the time where you need to be the emotional support. They're probably not going to want to talk about any kind of specifics or anything. They may not even want to talk about whether or not they're going to continue it. I had a really good teacher friend who is an excellent teacher who did not certify. And it was tough. It was really tough. But at that moment, especially at the beginning, she just needed me to listen. She just needed to vent, and she needed to hear that you are an outstanding teacher. It's a matter of making sure that that accomplished teaching is demonstrated. It's not that you are not an accomplished teacher. We've got to, you know, find a way to demonstrate it more clearly and more convincingly. Anything else? Any other insights on that one?
Just curious, did she ask you to read her work? Your teacher friend you were just talking about?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. I was just wondering if you were feeling that, and how did you handle, you know?
Yeah. I have not had that happen yet, but I think that's a good reason for, and this is another question, you know, how do you make it a reflective, how do you get them to reflect without giving them the answers? So I think when you're giving support, you need to be really mindful that the outcome could be that they don't certify, and be careful, you know, what you're saying to them. So I think it's really good to ask questions when you're providing support, because, you know, then you don't bear as much of the burden. You're not making the choices for them, I guess is a way to say it. But yeah, I had not read hers. She was pretty independent. She did have a mentor. She did work through the in-service center. And, you know, so I'm not really sure what happened. I feel like in her case, it was probably a situation where the writing, or maybe the lessons that she chose did not demonstrate what I know that she's doing in her classroom. But it's just a hard conversation no matter what.
It certainly is. And I think something that has helped me go through this working with people is some of the leaders that I respect and look up to, even that work for national board, didn't certify the first time. And now look where they are. And we have Tammy Kirkland over in Mississippi, and I'm sure she's okay with me sharing this, but she did an article about missing the mark, and she published it through national board, and she kept trying, and she did certified, and now she's leading things over Ole Miss for her state. So just because you don't get it the first time doesn't mean you can't. So I always try to give them that little bit of an encouragement and say, when you're ready, sit down with me. We'll look at that score calculator and we'll see, is there something that maybe you could just one component this year, component, and you know, where could we get the points out, and how could we utilize what we need to get there? So
add to, you know, this is our bar exam, if you will. And think about those that, you know, taking a CPA. I mean, my daughter's an MD, you know, how she had to take all these like board exams. My sister's, you know, CPA, had to take that several times, and she was the top of her class. So this is the equivalent to that for us. So if everybody just took it the first time and like breezed through it, then we wouldn't be having full day conversations about preparing and supporting candidates in this process. So I think Marcia, you know, really nailed it when we're talking about, we've got to be that support system for them when they don't get it. Say, you know, and many times when they go back and read it, they're like, I just didn't answer the questions. And I can't tell you how many times, like, the writing was really, really good. Like, it was just powerful, but you didn't answer. You were not consistent and concise and clear. So kind of going back to the drawing board, and then really celebrating them when they do get it. You know, everybody's all in, providing celebrations or pen tappings. I think we see so many districts doing some really cool ways to celebrate their NBCTs.
Okay, I have a question kind of on that line that I really didn't think about before. And I have mentored, through the in-service centers and Melissa when she did the Etowah County cohort. What about when you have that person who's coming through that just doesn't have it? That they're not, I probably encountered two that there was just no way they were going to certify and shouldn't have certified. How do you handle that situation when you're working with someone in your cohort?
I think that's really tough, but I will say that's where you want to focus on the professional learning experience that is going to provide for them. It's very tough when you kind of know that in the back of your head. But I think that's something where you keep it in the back of your head. You continue to support that person as best you can. You ask those reflective questions. And even if they don't certify, hopefully there's going to be some professional growth just by having that experience. Krista or Melissa, you want to add anything?
That's really exactly what I was thinking. Get them there and maybe they'll surprise you. Maybe they will get that growth and they'll learn so much that could transform their teaching.
We've had, that's something I've seen more of in the new process than I feel like we did before when you had to do it all in 1 year, because you kind of went into it knowing like, I will not sleep for the next 9 months. Not to say you sleep a lot in the new process, but I think because folks like, well, I can just do it in spurts and I'm going to start on it in November. Okay, then I'm going to wait till December, January, February, and then March. You're like, is it too late? And you're like, yeah, it probably is too late. That's been hard for me, but I have certainly encountered that the last couple of years where I know it's not that the teacher doesn't necessarily have the goods for it, but doesn't have the work ethic and is not willing to put in the time. When you've not put pen to paper, literally or figuratively, and is pushing, April, it's just, it's very unlikely this is going to happen for you. And so having a conversation to say, you think you have too much going on in your life right now, but you want to press pause because you want to spend time doing something you're going to be successful in. And that's, I think among us, we've had several conversations about that. How do you work with someone when you can kind of see the writing on the wall that they're not going to put forward the effort it takes?
And I think we're going to see this sort of thing happen even more with the Teams Act. It's such a great incentive. I know with our school, we have many people that are now considering it. And I hate to say it, but the money does motivate people. But I always tell people, you can't do this just for the stipend or for the financial incentive. It's too much. You have to give too much of yourself to just do it for the money. So, I think having that conversation at the beginning about what is your why? Why are you doing this? What is your why is good. Another question someone asked that is kind of related is, how do you best prompt your candidates to share their reflective ideas? And I think it's always good to kind of have some questions in mind before you even start talking to that person, before you read anything, is kind of have some basic reflective questions and always go back to the standards. That is just a good reminder of them that this is the rubric. This is the criteria. This is what you've got to always keep in mind as you're writing and answering these questions. And if you can come up with some reflective questions that are based in the standards, that's also going to help your person kind of think in that way too. Anybody else have some suggestions on how do you prompt candidates to share reflective ideas? Okay, here's another question. How do you handle a situation when a CSP does something questionable in a mentoring session, cohort meeting that you facilitate? So this is really tough. What do you do when you see a PLF or CSP doing something that you think, ooh, that's you should not be doing that? How do you handle that?
I think directness is probably the first step. draw it to their attention, because some people may just not even realize that they're doing something that's considered unethical.
I think that's a great point. And, you know, we have to remember that we are the arbiters of this process and this certification. As National Board Certified Teachers, we want this process to be valuable for the candidate. And we want to, you know, ensure that it's done ethically in the right way. And I do think that we have a responsibility as PLFs, if we see something that's not right, to have a conversation with that person and just say, hey, what, you know, here's a concern that I have. Because I don't think it's out of, I don't think people do it intentionally. I think you get in a situation where you're supporting somebody and you want it for them. You know, you see how stressed out they are. And it's really hard if somebody asks you, you know, well, can you just tell me what you did? You know, it's really hard not to fall in the trap, because you do want to be helpful to that person. So I can understand how a PLF or a CSP might, you know, do something that, you know, did not meet the criteria that we talked about as ethical and effective. So if you see that, you know, just have a conversation with them, be honest and be direct, because I do think that it is our responsibility to maintain the ethics and to maintain the process the way it should be done. Any other insights on that? Has anybody had any ethical issues so far? Have you had any struggles or specific situations that have come up supporting candidates or watching candidates support?
I've had a couple of people ask me to share what I did, like to share my materials, you know, and I just, I didn't, you know, and one of them, I just said, I can't even find it. But I mean, it was shocking for them to ask, because I know they know it's not okay. And it was very uncomfortable, but, you know.
Well, and maybe that's a situation too, where you can direct them to Alice, because I think that's a good answer. I've had that happen too. And, you know, so maybe that's a situation where you can direct them to Atlas and say, you know, I really want you to have this experience. Here are some exemplars. Here's some examples if you want to get a snapshot. But my 5-year-old said something the other day that I just thought was, I know she heard it from her teacher, but I was like, oh my gosh, this is so prophetic and meaningful. We were in the car and one of my kids was complaining about something, and my 5-year-old said, well, Miss Thomas says that we shouldn't steal someone's struggle. And I was like, oh, so profound. And I think that's the situation here, is the struggle, the process, the challenge that you go through, you really grow. And we don't want to steal that struggle from someone, because we know personally how that grows you. So that's another thing that I would say to someone is, you know, I know this is tough. I've been there, and I feel your frustration, but just keep at it and know that this hard work that you're going through, this challenge and this struggle that you're going through, it is going to grow you as a teacher. It is going to be worth it in the end.
Actually,
Yeah, because
we're
the
often
struggle is
asked-
real.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying the struggle is truly real.
I love that. I'm totally stealing that, Ashley. Don't steal my struggle. We're often asked in our sessions, like, can I see what it looks like? Like, how did you bold? How did you italicize? What does that look like? And so even I've started like a Google Doc where I have like just sample language just to show, like, you know, this is one way you can do it, but nowhere does it say you have to bold. No, well, you talked about that earlier in the scenarios. Nowhere does it say you have to italicize. It's certainly helpful if you do one or the other, just to be able to say, this is where I address that. But it seems to me it's sometimes what am I trying to say? The look of it. Like, I want to see how you did your margins. I want to see your candidate ID number is, which of course now we do things digitally. It's not so much, but that's a very common question. And so, you know, what we've started doing is just like, here's like just a Google Doc of just language, and it could look like we put the prompt and how you could reword that prompt into a statement, but not required. We also get into the don't write words, don't write numbers. You should only use numbers, and you should, like, I don't know where this stuff comes from. Like, all these people, like, you should say T instead of teacher, and you should say Miss P instead of, you know, I think I love the scenarios, because I think that whole, you know, I say something in a can, and by the time it gets to the end, we've changed it so much. I think there's been a lot of that in the kind of the National Board support community, when folks are getting really flowery in their writing, and then we start getting into don't use paragraphs, don't indent, don't use numbers. Yeah, I think we got to be really careful with that, because we're putting out some kind of misinformation. Of course, the English teacher in me is like, that is just all kinds of wrong.
Melissa, did you see that comment in the chat yet?
Yes, I'd be glad to.
Does anybody have any other questions or any reflections?
I don't have a question, but just a comment. I'm a mentor down in the Baldwin County area, and you were talking about what would somebody do if they saw a PLF, you know, doing something that was unethical. And just my own thought was just thinking, you know, sometimes I think people want to be so helpful that they may not always realize that they're doing something incorrectly. And so I think just in approaching somebody, just say, I know how much you want to be helpful, and I know how much you care about teaching and these candidates, but don't forget that, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I think just acknowledging that the mentor's trying to be helpful. Somebody's trying to really work with the teacher and a candidate to help them be successful. And maybe they haven't gone through the ethics form as much as they should have. And just, I think, acknowledging that, wanting to be helpful, and just saying, let's just double check this little thing here, you know, that's not quite the way we do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think just as much as candidates get in a point of frustration or anxiousness that they ask questions and ask you to do things that are maybe not ethical, I think candidate support providers also have that same struggle. And like you said, they're just trying to be helpful. I don't think anybody does these things with bad intentions. I think it's always coming from a good place.
Yeah.
I think it's important to.
And as you were saying that, I mean, remember I did this in 99. You know, 2000. So like,
yes.
there was none of this, like what we're talking about. And so people are like, and I was just like, oh, how can I help? And, you know, and then 10 years later, we started getting guidance. I'm like, oops,
yes.
You know, because that is who we are as teachers, is we want to be able to help other folks kind of build up their understanding of the process. So having conversations, that's why we really wanted to provide a micro credential for those that are participating in this, to say, you know, we've had conversations. We can't say, I don't know what I don't know, because now we know.
Right.
And how we can support moving forward.
We had Deanna had a question about how to redirect someone if you read the work and it was super flowery. I had that a couple months ago with a colleague that I was mentoring, and just full of these, you know, the flowing adjectives, extremely, and all that. And I just shared with her simply, you know, just think about how college graduate school articles are. It's clear, it's concise, almost to the point of boring. If you're explaining it, what happened, just the facts, just simply like that. And you just have to be, you know, really gentle with it sometimes, and just redirect again. Like when Melissa said with the stems, that was the best thing that my mentors helped me with. You know, Susie did this, or I did this because Susie did, and keep it clear and concise. But you have to redirect them to it and just kind of be gentle with it sometimes.
Absolutely. It looks like Dr. Stewart, did you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I on the lines of advocacy, I would like to ask, and I think I heard this in the last session, but not sure. When we go to Montgomery, like we've done in the past, are we looking to do that virtually this year or in person for advocacy? My second question is, probably Melissa can answer this, or anyone. Are we looking to expand English language arts as a critical need area for our schools where there's a need for national board teachers in critical areas? I know right now it's what math, CTE, all of the generalists on the elementary level, but I'm secondary, and so our math and CTE teachers have that currently, but I would like to advocate for, and is there anything on the horizon, or how can we advocate for an additional area like English language arts, because we birth all the other areas as far as being able to write and advocate and everything like that. So that's question number 2.